Okay, this is going to be 1302, Unit 3B, the Consumer Society. We're looking at the 1920s, and there's several big topics here that could be the basis of essay questions. So I'm speaking to people who can't hear me or see me because you're not watching these things. But if you're not, those who are not really fulfilling the requirements of the course. So they really are not going to have any basis for complaint if the grade doesn't work out. Okay, the consumer society. You're a consumer if you buy stuff and use it. Everybody is a consumer. The reason, basically, what emerges in the 1920s and is still very much with us to the present day is it's a consumption-based society, different from the past because in the past your position relative to other people was not primarily based on the stuff you had. In a consumer society, you evaluate your position in society and your progress in life based on having all the right stuff. All right. So, to lead off with this, what happened to middle class living standards in the 1920s? We're going to focus on middle class people because wealthy people, their lives don't change that much because the new products don't affect them that much. Working class people, most of them can't afford it. It's the new do-jiggers. Anyway, so we have to define what is meant by living standards or standard of living in economics. That's a pretty precise definition. Um, let's say we could figure up the dollar value of the entire output of the economy for a year. That's going to be called the gross domestic product or the GDP. Now, if we took that and divided it up equally, how much would each of us get? What would be your individual share of the annual output of the economy? So to get that, you divide one really big number into an even bigger number. You divide the total population into the gross domestic product, the estimated dollar value of everything produced by the economy in a year. That gives you the per capita or per person GDP. That still cannot necessarily be compared from one year to the next because it can be distorted by inflation or deflation. So if you correct for that, and economists have certain magic tricks that they use, if I had time I'd explain a little bit about it, to correct for inflation. Once you do that, to make the figures over a period of years more comparable, you have the per capita real GDP. In economics, something is real if it's been adjusted for inflation. Okay, there you are. So, having said all that, what did happen to middle class living standards? Well, they went up during the 1920s. Two reasons. I'm going to put the one up at second and the supplements first here. You can't really pull them apart. Incomes trended upward for middle class people during that decade. Over the decade, they go up about 30%. That's a lot. We haven't seen that really since maybe the 1950s and 60s. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is there's a whole list of new products out there that middle class people could afford and buy. And owning these things, possessing these things, those are the trophies, the emblems of being up with the times. You're living in the 1920s. That's the modern era. You got all this stuff. So there you go. If you've noticed, you might not have, but every decade seems to have the next big thing. There's always a next big thing. Starting with the 20s, automobiles, which have been around for a while, but only rich people could afford them. By that time, regular people could buy cars. And to complete the next question, what new products became available? You got radios, and these were big old jobs like a piece of furniture, something you pay out by the month. You have things in no particular order. Toasters. The toaster was to the 1920s kitchen what the microwave was to the 1970s kitchen. It greatly speeded up and simplified the preparation of a food article, toast, that almost everyone consumed. But we're not through. Vacuum cleaners, electric fans, bzz, move some air around. They didn't have air conditioning yet and wouldn't for a good while. Um, Toast washing machines. They don't look like the washing machines they do now. These big old tub-looking things with an electric motor in there that turns an agitator back and forth. You'd use a stick to poke stuff around in there. When I was a little kid, my mom would take my brother and me to town, which happened to be La Mesa, Texas, to a laundromat where they had a bunch of these big old tub things. We'd do the laundry. I guess I dated myself. I don't care. I'm too old to care. Washing machines, etc. Now, uh, all but one of those things have something in common. Did you catch it? Probably not. All but one of them have to be plugged into the wall. They run on electricity. Cars didn't. Everything else did. So that's a connection we'll come back to in a slightly different connection a little bit later on. So the 1920s, you got all that. The 1930s is pretty far down. There's not that much of a new thing. The 40s were fighting a big war and getting back on our feet afterwards. But the 1950s come along. Part of the next big thing then was a TV set. Very few people had TV sets in 1950. By the end of that decade, if you didn't have a TV set, it's because you're trying to avoid it. The 1960s, it's your first color television set. 1970s, it would be, I'm going to say, a microwave oven. Those were invented in the late 1940s. They were hideously expensive, and here's a reversal. They were used in high-end restaurants where they'd have this food sort of prepared and refrigerated. So when you order something, you get it out of the fridge and stick it in the microwave, and wow, how'd you do that fast? They become popularly priced by the 1970s into the 80s. Okay, 80s, basically desktop computers. In 1980, somebody figured out there's somewhere around 35,000 desktop computers in the United States. Um, Almost all of them built, hand built by hobbyists. Their capabilities would be extremely primitive and slow compared to now. Big six-figure computers were primitive and slow too. Uh, so by 1982, there's 2 million, and the number continues to expand exponentially. We don't have an internet yet. That's going to come along in the 90s. And there wasn't software. That industry is not there yet. They didn't come with software. They came with a programming manual. I date back to that time. I wrote my own grade book one time. I was very proud of it. Nobody could have used it but me. Ran it on a Commodore 64. Everybody had one of those. And my proudest achievement was teaching it how to sort. Oh, give me a green stamp for that. And then on down the 1990s, the internet, um, faster connections, and then iPods, smartphones, tablets, on down to the present day. Okay, so the 1920s, all of a sudden, a whole list of next big things, or first big things that people wanted and were more than willing to pay for. Okay, um, now economists would rate these things by the technical term consumer durables. Something is a consumer good or for consumption if you're just going to use it personally and use it up. It's not going to be used in a as capital equipment. One simple thing of something might be, one thing or the other, and these probably are out of style by now. Let's say you decided you were going to go out to the Grand Canyon and take photographs of the Grand Canyon that you're going to try to sell. So it's a business operation. So you hop over to Arlington Camera and lay out about $4,500 for a Nikon D850 that'll do full HD video and so 45 megapixel sensor and some really expensive lenses. That would be capital investment. If you bought that stuff just to have fun taking pictures and you got deep pockets if you're using that for that, tell me about it. Then that'd be consumption. So a durable good is something which is used for at least 2 years or more. So things you're going to use up are not durable goods, but these are all pieces of equipment. You're going to use your car, probably your radio, toaster, whatever it might be. That's going to be for more than 2 years. So there's a whole list of these things that are coming on the market for the first time. And where did I put that? I know this looks funny. Well, I'm trying to follow the class notes worksheet and I just get lost in the wilderness. Okay. Now, um, there were some serious developments in certain key areas relating to the manufacturing industry that that led to these changes in middle class living standards. Okay, something I always used to do in face-to-face classes when I got to this point was tell everybody, just you follow me on this. You are having a dream, and in your dream, you are at Walmart or maybe Costco. Take your pick. And you're amazed, you're stunned, you're blown away. It's the biggest thing you've ever seen. You're just wandering around, and it's just endless aisle after aisle, row after row, shelf after shelf, as far as the eye can see, and it's all packed with stuff of every conceivable description. And finally, it just overwhelms you. And you fall to your knees in the middle of the aisle and you lift your face up to heaven and you cry out, "Where did all this stuff come from?" You never had the dream, did you? Because we take it for granted. Where did it come from? Okay. If the word manufacturing still meant skilled craftsmen working with hand tools, would all that stuff be there? No, it wouldn't. So that stuff is there because of a multi-phase revolution in manufacturing processes, plus a few other things. So mainly, how did it become possible to bring into physical existence that much stuff? Okay, that goes back to something that's been going on now for a quarter of a millennium, known as the uh, Industrial Revolution. We'll get to some specifics on it here in a minute. Now, another thing that's changed is advertising. Advertising venues, advertising techniques. Advertising's been around for quite a long time. But the 19 teens and 20s and the way things got to be in the 20th century put crushing pressure on advertisers to get a lot better at what they're doing, because manufacturers are producing vastly increased quantities of merchandise, and they gotta find a way to move that. They need advertisers who can convince people that they can't live without some product they never even heard of till year before last. There's consumer financing. Some of this stuff's, more money than the average person can just haul out of their pocket and buy. And, you know, if the buyer can't buy, the seller can't sell. I may say that again before it's over. So, consumer financing means that the seller finances the sale, in effect, lending the buyer the money to buy whatever it is with. Interest rates tend to be really high. So, the honest customers are going to pay interest rates high enough. And by the way, you finance a purchase, you will end up paying about twice the sticker price by the time you pay it off. But you got some that just walk out the door with it and you never hear from them again. So the prices have to cover that. And something that's not on your list here, planned obsolescence. So we're going to look at those. Okay? See where I am on time. I don't have a lot more. I'm going to stop this down and go into that in the next part.